Today we're going to look at solving one-step equations with multiplication or division. Yesterday we did this with addition and subtraction, and today we're going to do it with multiplication and division. Now remember our goal: to solve for an unknown number, which is represented by a variable. We want to get the variable on one side of the equation by itself. We accomplish this by using inverse operations. Inverse means to do the opposite. So if there's multiplication taking place, we're going to do the opposite, which is division. If there's division taking place, we're going to do the opposite, which is multiplication. Always remember that in order to keep both sides equal, what you do to one side, you must do it to the other side as well. So if we look at this equation, we have 5c equals 120, which means 5 times an unknown number equals 120. Since 5 is being multiplied times the variable, we want to do the opposite of multiplying, which means we want to divide 5 on both sides of the equation. When we do that, on the left side, 5 divided by 5 is 1. And when you have 1 in front of a variable, we just make that number invisible. So we just say that these numbers cancel out and you're just left with c. And then on the other side, we have 120 divided by 5, which is 24. Now to check this, we think the unknown number is 24. So if we plug it back into c, we could check by saying, okay, what is 24 times 5? And when we check it, we indeed find out that 24 times 5 is 120. So it checks. It is the correct answer. Here we have negative 4x equals 20. The unknown number, or the variable, x, is being multiplied times negative 4. The opposite of multiplying is dividing. So we're going to divide both sides by negative 4. Negative 4 divided by negative 4 right here is a 1. So we have 1x. So the 1 can become invisible. So we just have x left on that side. And on the right side, we have 20 divided by negative 4, which is negative 5. Again, we could check this by plugging negative 5 back into the original equation. And we see that negative 4 times a negative 5 does make a positive 20, because two negatives make a positive. So it checks. This time we have division. This says y divided by, this fraction bar right here says divided by 4. So our unknown number is being divided by 4. And the opposite of dividing is multiplying. So we're going to multiply both sides by 4. When you do that, it's like having 4 over 1, or having 4 on top. Well, these cancel out, and you're just multiplying the right side also by 4. And that would equal a negative 32. Again, if we plug it in there, back in there, we think the unknown number is negative 32. So what is negative 32 divided by 4? And it does check out to be negative 8. So that is the correct answer. This time the variable is on the right side of the equation, but the same thing is taking place. It is being divided by a negative 2. The opposite of dividing is multiplying, so we're going to multiply both sides by a negative 2. And this would be over 1. These cancel out. So on the left side, we just have 7 times a negative 2, which is negative 14. Again, if we want to check it, if we plug in negative 14 to the variable, that would be negative 14 divided by negative 2, which when you divide two negatives, you get a positive, and that would be positive 7. So it checks. Here we have a fraction. Negative 3/5 times an unknown number equals negative 6. When you have a fraction that's being multiplied by the variable, if you remember that with multiplying by fractions, we're doing the inverse operation, which means we want to divide by this fraction. But when dividing fractions, we actually don't divide. We multiply by the reciprocal. You remember our KFC, where we keep the first fraction, flip, and change the sign? We multiply by the reciprocal. So when you have a fraction like this, we're going to multiply by the reciprocal. This is what it looks like. A reciprocal is the flip. So you're multiplying times a negative 5/3. Well, on the left side, 5 and 5 are both divisible by 5, so they become 1s. 3 and 3 are both divisible by 3. They become 1. So both of these fractions cancel out to just 1. That's what we want it to be. We want to have a 1x. On the other side, we can put the whole number over 1, and we have negative 6 over 1 times negative 5/3. If you remember, we can simplify before multiplying by doing our cross-canceling. They're both divisible by 3. 6 divided by 3 is 2. 3 divided by 3 is 1. And we multiply across, we have a negative 2 times a negative 5, which is a positive 10. So now you're going to have to remember our multiplication rules with the fractions as well. Now we could check that by plugging 10 back into the original equation. And when you plug in a whole number, it's like it being over 1. And if we cross cancel, divide by 5, we would see that on top we have negative 3 times 2, which is indeed negative 6, which was our original equation. So when dividing by a fraction, you're going to get rid of it on one side by multiplying by the reciprocal, the flip of it. Here we have a drive-through safari zoo that charges $12.50 per person. In 1 hour, the park raised $675 in admission fees. Write and solve an equation to find out how many people visited that hour. When you see this word per, look at what is following it. This is where our variable is going to be. It's $12.50 for every person that comes. That's our unknown number because we don't know how many people. So we're going to write that as $12.50 times the unknown number, x. This represents the number of people that came. They raised $675, so that's the total. So our equation B, what are we multiplying times $12.50 to get $675? Well, here's our one-step equation. We have $12.50 times x, so we're going to divide both sides by $12.50 in order to solve. And $675 divided by $12.50 is 54. So there was 54 people that came in to the park. If you're looking at your assignment, this is from punchline 4.4. Again, looking at this, we have negative 5 times an unknown number. So when it's multiplication, we divide. And when we divide with one positive and one negative, we know the answer is going to be negative. And 60 divided by 5 is 12. So our answer is negative 12. We could check that mentally by plugging negative 12 in here and saying, okay, what is negative 5 times negative 12? And indeed, it's a positive 20. Here the variable is on the right side of the equation, but it's still being multiplied, so we're going to divide both sides by 8, and that's going to result in a negative 4. I hope this helps with your one-step equations with multiplication and division.